Hello and welcome. He's seen the number of AIDS infections go from just a handful to millions across the globe. Battling the killer disease and finding a cure has become a life mission for him, and he says progress is being made, even if it's slow. This week on One on One, meet the Executive Director of UNAIDS, Dr. Peter Pior. Africa is in his blood, going back to his days as a young doctor travelling away from his native Belgium. Dr. Peter Pior found the vibrant continent was hard to leave and always easy to return to, so he spent a fair amount of time there. He came to prominence in 1976 when he was one of the co-discoverers of the Ebola flesh-eating virus in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Pior also became one of the early inductees in the battle to stop the spread of AIDS in Africa from the first formal meeting held in 1985. The past 2 decades have taken up much of his life as he races around the world, continuing to fight HIV/AIDS. Dr. Pior, great to have a chance to chat with you. You know, in setting up the United Nations AIDS Agency, you've essentially gone from being a scientist to an activist and a manager. How has that role changed what you do?
Yeah, it's a very different role I have now than 20 years ago. I started really as a scientist, a researcher, but always with a major interest in the, let's say, the social side of medicine. And when AIDS came up, it was kind of made for me in the sense where you've got a new disease, a new virus. So the scientific side was exciting, but also it is linked with such complex societal issues, and that was absolutely what I enjoy. But now, as you have to lobby and to deal with the politics of it, do you miss the grassroots? Not really. What I miss is now and then is sit down with people who are doing it, and I try to do that wherever I go, to every country. I sit down with people living with HIV. I always insist I go to some slum area or a village. But of course my daily work is very far from that, and yes, I miss that.
Now, when you were setting up UNAIDS, following your work at the global program at the World Health Organization, was it a natural progression, or did you have to struggle to set up the agency?
It was a big struggle to set up UNAIDS because of dissatisfaction by the member states, who are the shareholders of the United Nations, and because UN agencies were spending more time making each other's life difficult when it came to AIDS, rather than doing something about the problem. And so the member states were fed up and said, you know, we really want a unified response to AIDS in the UN system. And also, and that was a rare event of foresight, I would say, of vision, in the Economic and Social Council of the UN said AIDS is going to be at the core of development, social and economic development, and we need a response that goes across all sectors. This is not only something for doctors. But it was very difficult. One, I didn't know the UN, and I thought I knew English, but the type of language that one uses there is a bit mysterious, still is to me sometimes. But also, you know, the bureaucracy, and I'm a very focused person. I'm in this job because of AIDS, and I want to stop this epidemic. And, but that's the way that I try to bring all actors together. I said, I'm not interested in your mandates, in you know, what the processes are and so on. I'm interested in supporting people on the ground and fighting this epidemic. And that's, I think, how we could make progress. But the first years were very depressing for me.
So in the decade that's passed, how has the agency changed? How have you been able to shape it to the way you would like it to work?
In the early days, we were basically an advocacy group based in Geneva, and our work was the following: tell the world this is a bad epidemic, it's going to get worse, and we've got to do something. Because let's not forget that 10 years ago, AIDS was not on the map in most countries, was not on the political map. There was hardly any money. There was like $200 million US for the whole of the developing world, and today that's $8 billion. So there's a major shift that happened. And so I had 3 objectives when I got into this job. The first one was to put AIDS on the political agenda. Because I'd seen in my work as a scientist and as a community worker on the ground in Africa that you can know everything, you can have all the best evidence. If you don't have that commitment at the top level, it won't happen. So put AIDS on the political agenda. Secondly, build a broad coalition to deal with this problem. As long as only doctors and some AIDS activists and some scientists deal with it, I thought we were talking to ourselves, and I wanted to go out of that AIDS ghetto. The churches, the mosques, big business, the unions, politicians, women's movement, I wanted all of them to be engaged. And third objective was to mobilize money, because without money you can't go anywhere.
One of the problems is getting people to understand the real threat of AIDS, and especially in the developed world, people tend to think it's something that doesn't concern me. Yeah, so I wonder, is it something that you ever thought would directly or could directly affect your family? Have you ever thought about the risk of HIV/AIDS directly in your own life with your family?
Yes, of course. I mean, I worked a lot in Africa. I lived in Africa, and I lost friends, colleagues, and it can happen to anybody unless you sit in a chair for your whole life and do nothing. But and it can. I mean, I've got kids who grew up. I think it's something that can affect anybody directly. I think. I mean, I could have been infected just as anybody else, and that's why it's so important to not think that AIDS is something for others, that it will not affect me. But it's one of those issues today in our globalized world that is really globalized. It's truly, AIDS is about the globalization of risks. And it's something that, of course, you will find more in South Africa than, let's say, in Belgium. But in any country in the world, you can become infected with HIV.
What do you think it is about your own personal character that that helps in trying to fight this never-ending battle against such a powerful disease?
Well, I have a high degree of curiosity of what's going on in the world, and that's why I became a scientist, I guess. And I did research, so I want to know what's going on in the world. Two, I'm really convinced that in today's world, we need global approaches to issues. Certainly, when it's the big global issues of our time, and AIDS is one of them, but global warming, I mean, peace and so on, the fight against poverty. So that's a deep conviction I have. And then I think probably an ability to speak with a high variety of people, whether it's Riz Khan or an AIDS activist or the CEO of a pharmaceutical company or the Prime Minister of China. I think it's very important that you can make that link, but always stay on message. If I would say different things to different people, I mean, my credibility would be gone in a few months, no?
I'll touch on some of the people you speak to and the difficulties you face at those top levels in a little while. But let me first talk about your background, your curiosity, as you've described it. Is it something you had from an early age, from your childhood? Did you always want to be a doctor?
Not really, no. But I always wanted to see the world. I come from a small village, and I felt fairly suffocated with too high social control, and I wanted to see the world. So I would read books. This is the pre-television area and pre-web area, about adventures, and that was my dream. But I had a high interest in science, in mathematics, biology. I was always a very good student, and I started actually in doing physics and physical engineering, but then it sounded too complicated, too technologically. Any instrument that has more than 2 buttons is a problem for me. So I went to medicine, and I thought with that I have a passport to see the world. But it also, I thought, medicine combines science and the people aspect. So that's what appealed to me, and the social aspect. That's why I did medicine.
Now, you obviously like working with people, and you seem to thrive working in the developing world environment. What was it that first drew you to Africa as a young doctor?
I arrived for the first time in Africa totally unprepared. It was in 1976, where I was in training for medical virology and microbiology at the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, and we discovered the Ebola virus, one of the most dreadful viruses that exist, killing about everybody. Get it, and it was new, and very exciting. And in 48 hours, I found myself in the middle of then called Zaire, the tropical rainforest, and it was the adventure of my life, the kick of my life also, and it changed my life. Most people, or many people who were asked to go there with this epidemic, they said, no, sorry, I have a wife or I have kids or whatever, you know. But I was so excited. I had also, my wife was pregnant actually, but I was so excited and so thrilled by the adventure. And I liked it. I saw people are very nice. There is a degree of wisdom that we in Europe, I think, got lost because people take the time to talk. There's the oral tradition, and I felt here I can do a lot. I can make a difference.
And you were in your mid-20s, or coming up to just 26, 27.
I was 27 in years, that's right.
And you basically were involved in a major international discovery of the Ebola virus.
That also, besides the scientific aspect, I learned a lot of the job, how to investigate an epidemic, I was on my own at some point in time in a very remote area. So I learned a lot of, let's say, logistics, management, but also how to work in an international environment. And the rivalries between the Americans, the WHO was there, South Africa, the Brits, the French, and I was this little Belgian in there. But I could see that there are some advantages coming from of being small and not having all the power. You can leverage others, or you can be the compromise figure, and you can just make sure that you get the best out of what others can't deliver themselves.
Well, Dr. Pior, don't move. We're going to get back with more questions and look at your life. We're talking with Dr. Peter Pior of UNAIDS, and we're back with him in just a moment on One on One.